Once upon a time in a quiet village, nestled among the rolling hills and winding rivers, lived a potter known far and wide for his craftsmanship. His clay creations were the lifeblood of the village, jars to store grain, cups for drinking, and pots to cook warm meals. Every piece that came from his hands was a testament to his skill and care. One warm afternoon, with the sun casting long shadows across his workshop, the potter sat before his wheel. He gathered a lump of clay, its dampness cool under his fingers, and began shaping 2 jars. His hands moved swiftly and gently, knowing the clay like an old friend. After hours of patient work, the 2 jars stood before him. The first jar was flawless. Its smooth surface glistened in the light, and its shape was perfect. No blemish marred its body, and it stood tall and proud, reflecting the potter's years of experience. The second jar, however, was different. Despite the same care in its creation, it emerged with several cracks running along its sides. Though still strong and functional, the jar felt inadequate next to its flawless companion. The potter looked at the jar, not with disappointment, but with a quiet smile, as if he saw something others couldn't. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the potter decided to test the jars. The next morning, he took them both to the nearby stream. He filled them with water, letting the cool liquid slosh within their clay walls. The flawless jar held every drop of water perfectly, while the second jar, with its cracks, began to leak immediately, leaving a trail of water behind as they walked the path home. The cracked jar noticed the water slipping through its sides and felt a deep pang of failure. Each day, the potter made the same journey, filling both jars at the stream, and each day the cracked jar would lose more water. Its companion, the flawless jar, would stand tall and silent, carrying all of its water without a single drop spilled. The flawless jar often teased the cracked jar, saying, "Look at you, always leaking, always wasting the potter's precious water. Why can't you be like me? Perfect, capable, and whole." The cracked jar said nothing, but it couldn't ignore the growing sense of inadequacy. Each day as they returned from the stream, the cracked jar hung lower, ashamed of its inability to hold the water. The burden of its imperfection weighed heavily on it, and soon it began to dread the daily walks with the potter. One day, the cracked jar finally mustered the courage to speak to the potter as he gently placed it on the shelf. "Master," the jar said in a trembling voice, "I am so sorry. Every day you fill me with water, and every day I lose half of it by the time we reach home. I am a failure, and I don't deserve your care." The potter paused, his hands resting on the cracked jar's surface. He looked at it with kindness in his eyes and said softly, "My dear jar, why do you think you are a failure?" "I leak, master," the jar replied, nearly choking with sadness. "I cannot hold the water like the flawless jar does. I am broken." The potter smiled gently. "Come with me tomorrow, and I will show you something." The cracked jar, confused but curious, agreed. That night, it lay awake, wondering what the potter could possibly show it that might change how it felt. It had seen itself fail day after day, the evidence of its imperfection clear in every drop of water it lost. The next morning, the potter took both jars to the stream as usual. The flawless jar stood tall, gleaming in the early morning light, while the cracked jar prepared for another day of failure. The potter filled both jars, and they began their journey back home. As always, the flawless jar held its water perfectly, while the cracked jar leaked along the path. But this time, the potter led the cracked jar's gaze toward the ground as they walked. "Look closely," the potter said. The cracked jar did as it was told and was astonished. Along the side of the path, where it had leaked every day, grew a stunning array of flowers. Bright daisies, delicate lavender, and vibrant poppies bloomed in abundance, their petals stretching toward the sun. "These flowers," the potter said, his voice warm with affection, "have been watered by you every day. Without your cracks, without your leaks, they would not have grown. While the flawless jar has done exactly as it was made to do, you, with all your imperfections, have brought life to this path. You have nurtured beauty in a way that even the flawless jar could not. The cracked jar was speechless, overwhelmed by the beauty it had unknowingly helped create. For weeks, it had believed itself to be a failure, never realizing that its imperfections had given rise to something far greater than it could have imagined. I want you to understand, the potter continued, that being flawless is not the only way to be valuable. Every flaw, every crack, every imperfection you carry has its own purpose. You have nurtured this path, and these flowers are here because of you. In life, what we see as weaknesses often hold hidden strengths, waiting to bloom in their own way. From that day forward, the cracked jar no longer envied its flawless companion. It no longer felt ashamed of the water it lost along the way. Instead, it took pride in the flowers it had helped nurture, knowing that its imperfections had their own unique beauty and value. The flawless jar, too, came to understand that perfection is not the only path to worth. While it held the water perfectly, it realized that it had missed the chance to create something new and unexpected along the journey. Together, the two jars continued their daily walks with the potter, one holding water, the other nurturing the earth with every step. And the potter, wise and kind, cherished them both equally, knowing that each had a role to play in the beauty of the world around them. The moral of story is, our imperfections are not failures. They are opportunities to create beauty and value in ways we may never anticipate.